Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. You need to see this. The message from Sam flashed on my phone, a cryptic and ominous statement that immediately set my heart racing. Attached was a link to some kind of live stream. With a sense of dread gnawing at me, I tapped the link, and what I witnessed shattered my world into a million pieces. There, on the screen, was my wife, Jessica, gyrating and grinding against another man in a seedy-looking club. Her movements were sensual, provocative, as she gave him a lap dance that left nothing to the imagination. My stomach churned, while rising in my throat as I watched the woman I loved betraying our marriage in the most profound way imaginable. "This can't be happening," I muttered, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone tighter. Jessica had told me she was going out with a friend tonight, but this was no innocent girl's night out. This was a blatant lie, a cruel deception that cut me to the core. As the live stream continued, the camera panned to the man's face, revealing his identity as Keith, one of Jessica's co-workers. The betrayal stung even deeper, realizing this was someone she knew and worked with regularly. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me, looked me in the eye, and pretended everything was fine? Rage and hurt boiled within me, a potent cocktail of emotions that threatened to consume me entirely. I needed answers, needed to confront her, to understand how she could do this to me, to us. With shaky hands, I downloaded the live stream video, ensuring I had irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. As the footage continued playing, I tracked the location of the club, my jaw clenched and my heart pounding with a fury I'd never experienced before. The drive there felt like an eternity, each second stretching into an agonizing moment as I replayed the video in my mind. The image of Jessica grinding on another man seared into my psyche. When I finally arrived, I stormed into the club, my eyes scanning the dimly lit room until they fell upon her. Jessica was sitting with a group of her friends, laughing and completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to come crashing down around her. Keith was there too, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders, and I felt a white-hot rage course through my veins. "Jessica!" I bellowed, my voice cutting through the pulsating music like a knife. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening as she recognized me. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn on her face, the shame and guilt etched into her features. She knew she'd been caught, and there was no denying it. "Rick, what are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "Don't play dumb with me," I snarled, holding up my phone with the live stream still playing. "I saw everything. You're giving lap dances to this piece of trash while lying to me about where you are." Keith rose to his feet, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. "Listen, man, it's not what it looks like." "Shut up," I roared, turning my attention back to Jessica. "Don't bother coming home. We're done. I'm divorcing you." The words felt like razors slicing through my heart, but I meant every one of them. This was a betrayal I could never forgive, a breach of trust that had shattered the very foundation of our marriage. Turning to Keith, I fixed him with a glare that could have melted steel. "And you made a huge mistake messing with my wife. This isn't over." With those words hanging in the air, I spun on my heel and stormed out of the club, my fists clenched and my mind reeling. The world as I knew it had been turned upside down, and I had no idea where to go from here. In my distressed state, there was only one place I could think to go: Sam's house. He was not just my best friend, but also a lawyer, and I knew I would need his guidance and support to navigate the turbulent waters ahead. Sam welcomed me with open arms, his brow furrowed with concern as I recounted the sordid tale of Jessica's infidelity and the confrontation at the club. He listened intently, his jaw tightening with each painful detail I shared. "I'm so sorry, man," he said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "No one deserves to go through something like this." I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat as the weight of the situation threatened to crush me. "I don't know what to do, Sam. My whole life just imploded." "Don't worry, we'll get through this together," he assured me. "I'll handle the divorce proceedings and any legal issues that come up. You just focus on taking care of yourself right now." His words provided a small measure of comfort, but the pain and betrayal still gnawed at my core. As if things couldn't get any worse, the next day brought a fresh wave of anguish. Jessica had filed a false report, accusing me of assaulting her at the club. The audacity of her lie was staggering, but I knew I couldn't lash out in anger. I had to remain calm and strategic, proving my innocence and ensuring she didn't get away with this despicable act. Sam reassured me that with the live stream footage and his home security camera showing I had spent the night at his place, we could easily refute her claims. Still, the fact that she would stoop so low left a bitter taste in my mouth and fueled the fire of my rage. As I sat in Sam's living room, my head in my hands, I knew this was only the beginning of what promised to be a long and arduous battle. But I was determined to see it through, to ensure Jessica and her lover faced the consequences of their actions, no matter what it took. In the days that followed, the initial shock and pain of Jessica's betrayal slowly gave way to a simmering anger that burned deep within me. I couldn't simply let her and Keith walk away from this unscathed, not after the depths of their deception and the false accusations she had leveled against me. "Sam, I can't just sit back and do nothing," I said, my fists clenched as we sat in his living room. "They need to pay for what they've done." Sam nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I understand how you feel, man, but we need to be smart about this. Any rash actions could backfire and work against us. So, what do you suggest?" I asked, my voice laced with impatience. "We take calculated steps," he replied. "First, we need to gather as much evidence as possible. Document every detail of their affair, every lie they've told, every underhanded move they've made." I nodded, already feeling a sense of purpose taking hold. "Okay, I can do that. And then what?" A sly grin crept across Sam's face. "Then, we make sure they lose everything." Over the next few days, we meticulously plotted our revenge, carefully laying out a plan to systematically dismantle Jessica and Keith's lives. Sam's legal expertise proved invaluable, helping us navigate the intricacies of the law while ensuring we stayed on the right side of it. "The first step is to get them fired," he said, his tone pragmatic. "Without their jobs, they'll be scrambling to make ends meet." "How do we do that?" I asked, eager to set the wheels in motion. "Simple," Sam replied. "We anonymously send their employer the live stream video, along with a detailed account of their inappropriate behavior. No company wants that kind of scandal associated with their brand." A twisted sense of satisfaction washed over me at the thought of Jessica and Keith losing their livelihoods. It was a small price to pay for the pain they had inflicted upon me. True to Sam's prediction, it didn't take long for our plan to bear fruit. Within days of sending the damning evidence to Jessica and Keith's employer, we received word that they had both been terminated, effective immediately. "They're out of a job," Sam announced with a triumphant grin. "That's the first domino down." I couldn't help but smile at the news, imagining the looks on their faces when they were called into their boss's office and handed their pink slips. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. However, we weren't done yet. The next step in our plan was to ensure they lost their home as well. "Keith rents an apartment downtown," I told Sam, having done my research. "If we can get him evicted, they'll have nowhere to go." Sam nodded, his eyes glinting with determination. "Leave it to me." True to his word, Sam worked his magic, contacting Keith's landlord and providing him with a copy of the live stream video. He painted a vivid picture of the debauchery and inappropriate behavior, emphasizing the potential liability and public relations nightmare that could ensue if the landlord continued to harbor such tenants. Within a week, Jessica and Keith found themselves not only jobless but also homeless, their belongings unceremoniously dumped on the curb as they were evicted from the apartment. "They're out on the street," Sam reported, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Keith couldn't handle the pressure and bailed. "He's crashing with a buddy," leaving Jessica high and dry. I couldn't help but feel a sense of twisted gratification at the news. The woman who had so callously betrayed me, who had lied and manipulated without remorse, was now alone and desperate, her once comfortable life in shambles. "Serves her right," I muttered, taking a sip of my whiskey as I sat on Sam's couch. It was then that the doorbell rang, and Sam's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "That's probably her," he said, rising to his feet. Sure enough, when he opened the door, there stood Jessica, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her clothes disheveled, and her makeup smeared. She looked utterly broken, a far cry from the confident, alluring woman I had once known. "Rick, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking with desperation. "You have to let me in. I have nowhere else to go." I remained silent, watching her with a steely gaze as she groveled before me, begging for mercy. "I'll do anything," she pleaded. "I'll drop the assault charges, I swear. Just don't leave me out on the street." For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, a fleeting moment of weakness where I considered giving in to her pleas. But then I remembered the pain she had inflicted upon me, the lies, the betrayal, and my resolve hardened once more. "No, Jessica," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "You made your bed, now you have to lie in it." Her face crumpled, and she dissolved into tears, but I remained unmoved. She had brought this upon herself, and I was determined to see her suffer the full consequences of her actions. As Sam gently closed the door, shutting her out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The tables had turned, and Jessica was the one left powerless and alone, just as I had been in the wake of her infidelity. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a step towards the justice I so desperately craved. In the days following Jessica's desperate plea at Sam's doorstep, I found myself consumed by a newfound sense of determination. Her attempt to worm her way back into my life, to manipulate and deceive me once again, had only strengthened my resolve to see her face the full consequences of her actions. "Sam, we need to be smart about this," I said, leaning back in his living room chair. "Jessica's proven she'll stop at nothing to save her own skin." Sam nodded, his expression grave. "You're right. We can't let her slither her way out of this." It was then that a thought struck me, an idea so brilliantly simple that I couldn't believe I hadn't considered it before. "We need to get her to confess." "Confess to what?" Sam asked, raising an eyebrow. "The assault charges," I replied, a sly grin tugging at the corners of my mouth. "If we can get her to admit on camera that she made the whole thing up, we'll have ironclad evidence of her lies." A slow smile spread across Sam's face as he recognized the genius of my plan. "That's brilliant, man. But how do we get her to confess?" "Leave that to me," I said, already formulating the perfect strategy in my mind. A few days later, the doorbell rang, and when I answered it, there stood Jessica, her eyes puffy and her hair disheveled. She looked utterly defeated, a far cry from the confident, alluring woman I had once loved. "Rick, please," she whimpered, her voice trembling with desperation. "I have nowhere else to go. You have to let me in." I regarded her with a steely gaze, my jaw clenched as I fought back the wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. "Why should I?" I retorted, my tone icy. "After everything you've done, why should I lift a finger to help you?" Jessica's eyes widened, and she took a step back, as if struck by the venom in my words. I'll drop the charges," she stammered. "The assault charges. I'll drop them all, I swear. Just please, let me stay." A triumphant smile spread across my face as I recognized the opening I had been waiting for. "Say that again," I said, gesturing towards the ring bell camera mounted near the door. "Say it so the camera can pick it up." Jessica's gaze followed my gesture, and realization dawned on her features. She knew she had been caught, her own desperation leading her right into my trap. You want me to confess?" she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "That's right," I replied, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "Confess that you lied about me assaulting you, that it was all a sick ploy to try and get back at me." For a moment, Jessica hesitated, her lips trembling as she weighed her options. But in the end, her need for shelter and security won out, and she uttered the words that would seal her fate. "I lied," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the camera lens. "Rick never assaulted me. I made the whole thing up." A wave of vindication washed over me as I listened to her confession, the words I had longed to hear tumbling from her lips. With a smug grin, I stepped back and gestured towards the street. "You heard the lady," I said, my voice laced with triumph. "Now get out of here and find somewhere else to stay. We're done." Jessica's face crumpled, and she burst into tears, but I remained unmoved. She had brought this upon herself, and now she would have to live with the consequences of her lies and deceit. As she turned and trudged away, her shoulders slumped in defeat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The woman who had so callously betrayed me, who had lied and manipulated without remorse, was now exposed for the world to see. Justice, at long last, had been served. In the weeks that followed, Sam and I worked tirelessly to build our case, assembling the various pieces of evidence we had gathered throughout this ordeal. The live stream video, the security footage from Sam's house, and now the piece de resistance, Jessica's own confession, captured in crystal-clear audio and video by my trusty Ring Bell camera. With this mountain of irrefutable proof, we were able to not only clear my name but also ensure that Jessica faced the full weight of her false accusations. "The charges against you have been dropped," Sam announced, a triumphant grin spreading across his face as he hung up the phone. The prosecutor saw the evidence and knew they didn't have a leg to stand on. I let out a long, relieved sigh, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The specter of Jessica's lies had haunted me for far too long, casting a dark cloud over my life and my future. But now, with the charges officially dismissed, I could finally begin to move on. "And the divorce?" I asked, my voice tinged with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Sam nodded, his expression turning serious. "It's been finalized. You're a free man, Rick." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks, the reality of my newfound freedom sinking in. After months of turmoil, after the pain and betrayal of Jessica's infidelity, I was finally untethered from the toxic relationship that had consumed my life. A weight lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of liberation and possibility. The future, which had once seemed so bleak and uncertain, now stretched out before me, rife with opportunities for growth and healing. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life, piece by piece. With the support of friends like Sam, I gradually began to mend the wounds inflicted by Jessica's betrayal, learning to trust again and embrace the idea of a future free from her toxic influence. My career, which had once taken a backseat to the drama and turmoil of my personal life, became a renewed focus. I poured my energy into my work, finding solace in the familiar routines and challenges that had once brought me joy. Slowly but surely, the pain and anger that had consumed me began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and determination. I was no longer defined by Jessica's actions or the lies she had told. I was my own man, forging my own path, and the world was my oyster. As I sat on Sam's patio one evening, sipping a cold beer and watching the sunset, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been a long, arduous road, filled with heartbreak and betrayal, but in the end, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. "To new beginnings," Sam said, raising his bottle in a toast. I clinked my glass against his, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "To new beginnings," I echoed, taking a long sip and savoring the crisp, refreshing taste. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. The past was behind me, and the future beckoned, bright and full of promise. I was finally free. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.